remember that red is not a function of race, ethnicity, or religion. This is a common mistake that simple-minded people make who have not made these careful distinctions in spiral dynamics. People will often blame black people or Muslims or Islam or whatever. They will blame them for being inherently less developed, inherently evil, inherently barbaric, inherently uncivilized. This is the sort of myth of, Western culture is the greatest. This conservative myth. This is completely wrong. Completely wrong. Yes, generally speaking, Western civilization is more advanced and more developed spirally than other regions and cultures in the world, let's say, compared to the Middle East. But this is not a moral superiority. You have to be careful not to turn this into a moral superiority, and you have to be careful not to essentialize this and to link it to something like genetics or DNA or, the Aryan race sort of myth. And you want to be careful, like with this thing about, black people they don't have a high enough IQ or whatever, and that they are just red because that's how they are. All black people are red. No, black culture is not red. Parts of black culture is red because they've been very oppressed for hundreds of years. So that's very natural. But it can all evolve and change. And remember, cultures are growing at different rates. So just because Western culture right now is relatively advanced, that doesn't mean that African culture and Middle Eastern culture and black culture can't evolve relatively quickly in the next 50 or 100 years to match up or even to rise beyond. See? So that's very important. Otherwise, you're going to be a racist. So don't be a racist. And also don't link it to religion the way that Sam Harris does. So Sam Harris makes this mistake. He says that Islam is a uniquely violent religion, more so than Christianity and all others. This is not, I understand what he's saying, and in a certain sense, it's true, but in a deeper sense, it's deeply misleading. The reason it's misleading is because it tends to characterize all Islam as being stage red without acknowledging that there even is different stages, and it doesn't acknowledge that Islam can rise above red to blue and orange and green and even turquoise. Not only can it rise, but it already exists at these various stages, of course, in lesser degrees. Lesser percentages. But this idea that Islam is inherently red because there's a couple of passages in the Quran which, talk about violence. This is just scientifically and historically incorrect. And that's why people are pissed off at Sam Harris. Muslims are pissed off at Sam Harris because Muslims know that there's different gradations of Islam and there's toxic versions of it and there's more healthy versions of it. And when you say that all of Islam or a large percentage of Islam is toxic stage red and it has to stay that way, in a sense, you're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're dooming them to that. And then you're getting a backlash because, of course, there are millions of Muslims in the world who practice Islam at a more advanced stage of blue or orange or even green. And yet Sam Harris would deny, really, Islam the possibility of rising to green, which is problematic. Because in practice, you're not going to be able to wipe Islam off the face of the earth. In practice, the only thing that's going to happen is that you can evolve Islam out of red to blue, to orange, and to green, and then beyond. And you're not going to do that by demonizing Islam. You're going to do that by actually explaining this stuff. Imagine, for example, if everybody in the Islamic community understood spiral dynamics and understood the different levels of Islam, and then they could clearly make distinctions like, oh, those ISIS guys, okay, yeah, they're stage red, the Wahhabis. But then, in Iran, most of them are stage blue. And then in maybe even other parts of the world or whatever, other segments of Islam are more like the Sufis, and they're more green or more even turquoise, and that's a beautiful thing. And there's value in that. And And then they could see like, oh yeah, so what we have to do is we have to help people at stage red and stage blue start to interpret Islam in a more stage green, stage turquoise sort of way. How do we create systems that help to evolve them and move them up? Because you're not going to be able to convince them to drop Islam entirely. So that's a more strategic sort of spiral wizardry approach to that sort of thing. So can you see how making these more nuanced distinctions, how it is the solution to all of our geopolitical problems? We're not making nuanced enough distinctions. We're not employing the correct models. We're misdiagnosing the problems. And then people are fighting and blaming each other. There's these culture wars that are happening because we're not really understanding what's going on at the psychological level in terms of developmental psychology and consciousness and spirituality. So this is what we're talking about here is the operating system which will allow us to develop a more peaceful world.